Well, welcome to Convo with the Columns.
Action.
I was just dialoguing with Britton. I don't like to start or close. I like for him to do it.
It works a little better if my butt's in the seat first.
Welcome to Convo with the Columns. Real time conversations.
Indeed.
Mm-hmm.
Well, today's second topic.
Mm-hmm.
No wardrobe change again either today.
No, we're pretty low maintenance.
Why your story matters and where this is kind of where we're talking about. This isn't the how to tell your story per se,
Mm-hmm.
but it is a conversation on why your story matters and aspects of it that would be relevant.
Mm-hmm.
And so both of us have shared pretty well the majority of our stories each,
Mm-hmm.
both here and on other podcasts.
Yeah.
And so if you think about sharing your story, what would you say is the relevance of that?
Yeah, I think for me, the relevance is that I always want to dialogue hope.
Okay.
So if someone is walking through some really hard things and they hear our story and there may be some similarities, not even in the story part, but in the way we felt.
Hmm.
And then they see someone healed and maybe on the other side of that. I just feel like there's so much hope whenever, number one, you can recognize, oh, I'm not alone. And I think that's one of the biggest things we get baited into is believing that nobody else is experiencing or has experienced what we have.
Hmm.
And so I think there's so much value in, oh, I'm not alone in this. There's other humans that actually have felt this, and I'm not broken. I'm not unrepairable,
Mhm.
whatever the story is that you tell yourself. And so I think that is the number one value in sharing, or my hope maybe in sharing my story is that people know that they're not alone in it and then that they can see the hope on the other side of maybe where they are right now.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate how you dialogued the hope in it, because what I do think is that there are times that people would want to communicate story, but if they haven't processed it or if they haven't done any work around it, then we end up having a term called vulnerability regret.
I've been there.
Sure, I think
Mhm.
it would be a fair statement that probably most every single person
Mhm.
has experienced that.
Yeah.
But when we begin to talk about story, I think for me, we have this shared value as believers that testimony in of itself is a test in a story or a journey of our lives.
Mhm. Oh, that's good.
And that test isn't necessarily because we're trying to figure out humanity. It's more, to me, what are we doing amidst the things that are really hard, trying to steal, kill, and destroy while we exist in the earth.
Mhm.
And so I think of story being testimony for sure, and obviously hope. But what is also fun is in the different aspects of the way that we're made up. I think of story more as truth telling,
Mm.
whereas sometimes you can hear people communicate their story and they don't believe it.
Yeah.
They're talking about a circumstance almost as if it's disassociation,
Mhm.
but they don't see the value of having walked that out and or experienced that to the point of, for sure, hope.
Mhm.
But I think it's even bigger than hope. I think it to me, it's more of, what do you know about yourself now that you didn't know before that experience, because that wasn't taken from you.
Yeah. It's so good.
I don't know why that's hitting me.
It's a good word.
And so I think the value of our story is very much, it can go back to Revelation 19:10. The scripture says the testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy. Well, in general, if you just break that down, we're being wooed to declare who we are according to God, and according to God in that presence upon the return of Jesus, and in eternity there isn't that opposition. There isn't that vying against what we carry, who we are, what we were created for, the purposes that we have, the
Mhm.
works, all those things, right?
Mhm.
And so at that point now it becomes declaration, almost like I would use the term victory cries.
Mm.
These parts of my story are the victories of some major attack on my life, let alone on my person,
Mhm.
that is trying to apprehend what I would then believe about myself, or how at some point in my life what that would then reshape me to believe about me, or about God, or about
Yeah.
those around me even.
Mhm.
And so I think there becomes maybe even more in the conversation than maybe just hope. Hope for sure,
Mhm.
but that's definitely something that we're looking for when we're even listening to people in their conversations and asking questions. It's more to hear, I would use this term, what is the truth in their statement? What do they know that is true,
Yeah.
um, in love? I want to make that distinction, right? Because
For
we can run around and
sure.
communicate what we believe to be true. That doesn't make it truth per se, and that's a whole
Mhm.
different conversation.
Yeah.
But on account of story, I think that there's also the curious questions of, when did you feel like that you began to have permission to communicate aspects of your story? Maybe not the totality of it today, right? Because
Mhm.
that's the irony of our story, is every single day that we add to our life, we've added to the story.
Yeah. For sure.
But when you look back in your own journey, are there any particular things that stood out to you that began to give you permission to share?
Yeah, I think what gave me permission to share was, I think the very first step was having a space to share it and with other people and being met with compassion. And so for me, that helped. Not only, I think shame is healed in community. So I think when we have the courage to share our stories with safe people and we're met with compassion, healing automatically begins. And then it grows our courage to continue to process and verbalize and get some of the story out. So the first time I shared my story was an emotional intelligence training that you had gone through, and then I had gone through, and in a room full of strangers, and you begin to share your story. And
Mm,
but then you're met with compassion, and then that gives you courage to, like, okay, I'm not going to be judged, and I can keep speaking and processing. I think past that, I remember finishing that training, and someone said, "Now you know your story wasn't in vain." And I remember them saying that to me, and thinking, I wanna be there, I'm not sure I'm quite there yet.
sure.
But I think the more that we have safe places to share, whether that's with a coach or a counselor or your friends, the more healing that happens when you're met with compassion,
Right.
and then you just continue to have courage. I remember the first time I shared my story on a podcast, and it's been several years ago, and I had that vulnerability regret because I felt like, "Oh, wow, I just threw my story out."
Mhm.
And I think even then, probably shared some parts of me that maybe I hadn't completely healed in, that felt really vulnerable.
Mm. Do you feel like that it's completely healing, or that you may not understand where contributing factors or people in the story might receive the information?
Oh, for sure. I feel like that's like a whole other part of it, learning how to share my story with honor. And I haven't always done that well.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that as you communicated that, I feel like if there is a how to,
Mhm.
number one, that would be the principle that you want to communicate. And I remember you sharing this too. Vulnerability is you telling other people about what's going on inside of you.
Mhm.
And so I think sometimes people can confuse telling your story. I know this to be an example for me. I'm a
Mhm.
details person.
Mhm.
And so as I communicate story, I'm prone to wanna paint the picture so that when you close your eyes, it's as if you're in the same movie.
Mm, yeah.
That isn't always an accurate recount of me telling my story. It's relevant to me.
Mhm.
It those parts I find significance in as it relates to how I felt or why I felt the way I did or the takeaways that I had on account of those experiences.
Mhm.
But I really appreciated you clarifying the distinction and vulnerability because telling your story is very much being mindful of can you do this and it not create damage for the people that was included in the story
Yes,
because seldom are stories solely about ourselves
for sure.
as it relates to all that got impacted.
Yeah, I remember one of the first times, I shared my story on a stage, and it really hit me that, hey, my story is my kid's story. My story is, a lot of my family's story, and so it's not just about me, it's about, the people I love, the most, and I think too, when you were talking about details, if you have experienced a lot of what we call big T trauma, you start sharing details and someone's listening, it can actually trigger instead of bring healing.
Mhm.
I don't feel like it's necessary for them to know details to know how it impacted me, which goes back to vulnerability. You don't need to know the details of her rape, but you do want to know how that affected the person that it happened to.
Mhm.
What happened, like, what were the lies that they believed about themselves? Same with, like, physical abuse. I don't need to go into detail around every beating. What I feel like is vulnerability is me sharing what that did to my self-worth.
Sure.
And so I think that would be the difference. I think I usually communicate my story pretty high level because I feel like if, again, if they're even when we're in group, we do a lot of group coaching. I will say, we wanna know your experience, but we don't have to get into the weeds of it
Mhm.
because I was gonna say, especially with women, but I think now statistics are just as high for men around sexual abuse. Like, we don't need to go around and share details, just saying this has happened and this is what happened inside of me, the beliefs I picked up and the way I felt.
Sure. This is where it gets, I think, into a more nuanced conversation on account of knowing how many people have really found value in somebody maybe being more descriptive in some of their story
Mm,
and even certain things that people experience in what would be in the category of big T trauma. If it was so normalized in their family,
mhm,
they may unintentionally communicate something, but in a group setting,
mhm,
all of a sudden somebody else realizes that's not normal.
mhm.
And so I can appreciate and agree in a large way around the statement of the details. It's just holding some of that caveat of being very genuine in what you are articulating
For sure.
and knowing that in the aspects that you have shared, to the degree that we have the courage to continue to share those stories of victory, of reconciliation, of hope, of, redemption, of overcoming, of freedom, of like you can use
Mhm,
all these words, right?
mhm,
Understanding those adjectives in the story become the activator for other people to grab a hold of.
mhm. Yeah, I think that's where it gets really powerful, using adjectives of how you felt and what happened to your soul in that moment. Yeah, I think that's where it gets really powerful. I'm in agreement, using lots of adjectives with what was happening inside of me versus what was being done to me.
Sure. Are there times that you see people also get hung up in retelling their story?
Yes, when our stories become our identity, it's almost like their story gives them relevance, which all of our stories have relevance,
Mhm.
but I'm not my story.
Would you like to say that one again while
Yeah.
you're
I'm yeah, I'm not my story.
We can look
I'm
at them,
who
stare them
God
down, tell them
created
that.
me to be, right? Like, I am who God created me to be, and my experiences, good or bad, don't define me.
Mhm,
And so I think sometimes when someone has overcome like a lot of life obstacles, oftentimes though they don't know that's not who they are. That's just what happened to them, good or bad. Like even the healing is amazing and should be shared.
mhm.
That's still not who they are. And so, yeah, you can see people, their stories become their identity instead of who God created them to be. How would you describe it? Because I know you've seen the same thing, and I feel like you would use different words.
Um, as you were talking, I think there have been a couple of instances where this has gone both directions on a topic of cancer, physical
Mhm,
health, and
mhm,
healing in that. There's a scripture, John 16:33, that just talks about overcomer,
mhm,
being an overcomer. We've had a sweet friend that did overcome cancer and had amazing testimony around that, right?
mhm,
And then cancer came back and then just took her out.
mhm.
I don't feel like that her ever communicating that she was an overcomer
Mm,
was an invalid statement.
for sure not. Yeah.
And so I think a little bit, I love the way that you said the story becomes their identity, because I do believe that let's use the term cancer survivor, because there's a lot of that language, and I wouldn't
Mhm,
disagree. There's been enough of that in my personal family where I can appreciate when you get really significant health indictments,
mhm,
diagnosis, if you would, what it takes to get to the other side of that. But as a person operates in remission, again, on the topic of cancer, I've seen people in those circumstances because it was such an intimate part of them. It is a very close knit part of their story.
mhm,
I wouldn't say that I've known very many where that becomes their story. I think that
mhm.
you can become an advocate and you can cultivate passion in it.
For sure.
And so maybe that's the way that that person feels compelled to give purpose back in their life on
For
account of that
sure.
being a significant aspect of their story.
Yeah.
And I kind of represent it to you that way because you and I are sitting here on account of going after emotional intelligence with a significant amount of passion
Mhm,
and partnering or paralleling that to spiritual intelligence
mhm,
and the development of both of those running simultaneous to one another, because either of them in lieu, we can sit around here and we can this is cheeky, but we can quote scripture all day long. We can be a proverbial Bible thumper, if you will.
mhm.
But if we don't believe the half of it for ourselves, then they're just words that are resounding gongs. That's 1 Corinthians 13.
Yeah.
It is a story without love.
Yep.
And so that's where I would come back to it. Listening to, does a person hear love of themselves in the overcoming of the story, or
Mhm.
do they hear the love of the story?
That's good. Yeah, that's really good verbiage for that. I think too, though, when we talk about experiences, like you and I are coaches because of our experience,
Mm,
right? I'm passionate about coaching, especially women, because of my story. And so, back to our sweet friend, same thing. Like people that advocate for cancer or any disease that they've overcome, there's validity in that.
mhm,
I mean, yeah, for sure validity in that, but I think the difference is when I think about someone that their identity comes from their story versus their experience is when I think about our sweet friend, the first thing I think about is her joy
mhm,
and her love and her grit and just her compassion that would get so fiery.
mm,
And so I think that's how I see her. I don't remember, I mean, I know cancer was her story, but that's not the first thing I think of when I think of her.
mhm.
And I think that's just a testimony of how she lived her life.
Sure. That the
Yeah,
story didn't define the way that she filtered everything.
exactly.
I would even not to shift, but I can relate both where my story became my identity versus me wanting to be passionate in the realm.
Yeah.
Horses have always been a part of my life, will probably continue to always be. There was definitely a season where horses were my life versus being a part of my life. And I can think of even just the passion to want to coach people around horses isn't because I want the horse to be the focus.
Mhm.
I have a love for the horse, but I don't love a horse more than I love a person.
Yes. Yeah.
And I'm so interested in a person. If they want to learn a skill, I want to help with that, but I want it to be applicable to more than just a horse.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, if that's all that that skill gets applied to,
Mhm.
then to me, it feels very futile in
For sure.
regards to our purpose in the earth.
Mhm.
So that would kind of be the way that I dialogue, kind of the delicate balance in overcoming, whether it be health or whether it be occupation. How do we testify to those things so that we're here to encourage and strengthen, potentially comfort? Yeah, I think there's a lot to a story that I am now verbally processing. But because we are in an information age, I honestly believe that a lot of the value of story has gotten lost because we're inundated with so much dialogue.
Yeah. Yes.
And so, back to the importance of our story, I think as we find healing, restoration, hope, breakthrough, whatever it ends up being, big or
Mhm.
small, right? I don't even think that it has to be significant as far as comparisons go.
Yeah.
If it
Oh, no.
if it
Yeah.
if you know, it's not like story is meant to put over here in a category so that you can add the elements of the whys behind your story and then determine whether or not your story is worth repeating or whether your story has relevance to other people.
Yeah, I think that is one thing too that I've witnessed when I love that. Like, no, we don't compare stories
Mhm.
because it's not the experience necessarily that creates the story. Again, it goes back to we're all human and we all experience the same brevity of hurt and emotions. We've all experienced it. And so we're not comparing stories because it doesn't matter the story. What matters is that we connect as human beings by what we felt when that happened. And so I think whenever we get into story comparison, it's futile and it doesn't serve anybody at all.
Mm,
There's no place for that. What I want to know is, oh, you felt that, you felt that pain, I have felt that too. And we can get on the other side of this. There's hope on the other side of this. So I think I mean we've talked about this a lot. I don't want our kids or our grandkids to have a tremendous horrific story of overcoming. I would be grateful if they could live their life without any big T trauma because I don't want that for them. And that won't make them less of a human being or less of an overcomer, right? Because they're still going to experience hurt. They're still going to experience rejection. They're still going to experience someone letting them down, betrayal. It's just part of human life.
mhm.
And so when we can connect through, again, what we felt, what we experienced inside of us versus the experience. That's how we connect as human beings.
In going through the journey of even having permission to get into my story, I realized there would be a lot of topics that might be assumed as off limits.
Mm,
And so what I sense is that if you have not experienced much community that really values or has a core value for vulnerability and safety,
mhm,
then there's a good chance that you don't even know that you have permission to maybe explore some things that created hurt, sadness, loneliness. I think about the core emotion wheel, and you and I reference Dr. Glenn and Phyllis Hill a lot with the connection codes
mhm.
and their core emotion wheel, the 8 core emotions.
Yep.
I think even learning that after, an emotional intelligence training, it allowed me to constantly process what's going on inside of me. Because again, our story doesn't definitively have this end as
Mm,
we keep living.
for sure.
This might feel like a rabbit trail, but it's not. I think that there are a whole bunch of people in church culture because church culture doesn't often have space for the mud.
Mm,
That is one of the barriers, intentionally or unintentionally at times, where people don't even know that they could communicate that that actually affected them.
mhm,
And I can remember part of what I'm processing in the back of my mind, the through line of this is that we had a friend that I'd asked, like, if you were to want conversation, what topic would you say I would want to go and listen to that? And suicide was a topic of the story.
mm,
And so I share that personally because going through the emotional intelligence training, I would have never communicated to anybody that I was ever suicidal in my life. Like
mhm,
it just didn't cross my mind if I think about it through the lens of the church.
mhm,
But the more that I was in a room full of people that may have had active attempts on their life, or the term suicidal ideation, which is like your pain and your hurt is so significant, you just want it to end.
mhm,
And the random passing thoughts of, well, if the car went off the road or if I ran into, like however horse wreck,
yeah,
yeah, we could create like here would be an easy way for this to actually get terminal, but it would be hard to tell whether or not it was an accident
mhm,
or not, right? So in that context, I think even having permission to talk about the weight
mhm,
and the hurt, the brevity of the story, the pain and all of that,
mhm,
the absence of needs being met. At the
mhm,
end of the day, that would be kind of I don't want to boil it down at all, but that is the reality of it. Is we're not getting our needs met in healthy ways,
mhm,
and it exacerbates these really hard emotions that can't be reconciled because we don't experience all of it if we get to one end.
mhm,
So if I think about me going through depression, the loss of my dad, and where that took me, it was hard for me to experience joy,
yeah,
which would almost be the opposite end of depression
mm,
because I couldn't figure out how to make sense of that part in the moment.
mhm,
One, because there wasn't permission to actually get help, but two, because I didn't know how to process emotions.
yeah,
It wasn't modeled to me. And so I think about those times in my life where specifically walking that season out of depression, I wouldn't have ever identified as suicidal, but I did want it to end and I didn't know how to change it.
yeah,
And so I think about that kind of lens with a lot of people that would dismiss or discount or not even consider the weight of their story in lieu of it being related to or compared to
mhm,
here are really big T trauma graphic stories.
right.
Everybody doesn't have to be sex trafficked.
No. Yeah, I think every human has, I like how you said it, experienced their needs not being met. And we know that when we're in distress and our needs don't get met, then that's an opportunity for shame to enter and all sorts of pain, right? And if we don't have a safe place to process that, and if we don't even have the knowledge of how to process that,
Hmm.
if we haven't been taught, which most of us haven't,
Hmm.
then to your point, you're just gonna stuff it and just keep going and keep going and keep going. And I love
Hmm.
you keep nothing.
Hmm.
You weren't created to experience that level of pain solo. We were created to support one another. And that's where the power of compassion, right? Like either with a coach or a counselor, if you don't have a close community where it takes so much courage to reach out, but just the healing for someone to sincerely meet you with compassion and hear what you're experiencing. And that's where it started with me. Like, I just finally had the courage to start talking, and someone met me with compassion. And then I was able to get healing. And it wasn't my closest community first, right? It was in a room full of strangers. And so I think it's not about the experience. When we talk about, like, their sex trafficking and some severe trauma, I don't wanna discredit that does some severe psychological damage to your brain that sometimes you have to work
I
a
mean, we
lot
can
through, like,
you what
it's
well, the point of this isn't to get off into a psychological conversation
Right,
because you can also talk about third world countries, the absence of needs
right,
being met,
all of it.
you know,
Right.
orphans, negligence in their care,
Right, like,
like
a lot of that can sincerely affect your development, but when it comes to, again, life experiences, we can't escape hurt and like I said, in pain as human beings. It's gonna be a life experience, and we were all created to do life in community. And that's where we need safe places to share our stories, real time and past. Yeah, I think like you said, life keeps happening. We're still in our story.
Jesus has not come back yet.
Not yet. Not yet.
I'm contending for the Enoch or the Elijah moment,
Me too.
perhaps.
Me too, man. Me too. But I think, yeah, I think about even my own story. Oftentimes, when people say, like, what's your story? I have to take pause and go, that's where I came from. Like it's not a part of my everyday thought process at all. I don't want to live in the
Mm.
past. I want to live in the present. And so I'm willing to share my story, more than willing to share my story if it's going to bring someone hope and let them know they're not alone. But I don't want to live there. Yeah.
You Do you feel like that there's a difference in people communicating their story if they have faith or not, if they're maybe identified as believers?
I think this is just my personal belief. When someone shares their story and they're not a believer in Jesus, because that's the only religion I know that helps empower you without performance, then it gets into self effort. And so I often wonder, how long are you going to be able to sustain this on your own?
Mhm.
And that's one of the reasons I love Jesus so much, is because I have that supernatural grace that he empowers me, and I'm never alone in it. It's not in my own strength. So when someone shares their story and they don't have that supernatural grace to sustain them. This is just my belief. You can do a lot. We were created to accomplish a lot as human beings. But at some point, you're going to get to the end of yourself. That's my belief, and it's going to require something greater than you. How about you? I would love to know your answer.
I share it only through the lens of experience with people, not through education. And I think sometimes I want to be really clear. We're not trying to dialogue like we're counselors and experts and psychologists or therapists and all the things, but in the passion of mental health, what I have seen is that there are some people that have gotten to the other side, but I also love the way that you shared. It's still up to them.
Mhm.
To some degree, they're still going to be dependent upon their willpower to maintain the freedom that they're experiencing. And I believe that there's times that God can supernaturally show up and
Mhm.
they'll get a grace to maybe remain free or engage in freedom. I know that God can do that for people without them being believers. Like I
For
100%
sure.
believe in that.
I do too.
But But I think on account of a person communicating in their story hope, if we start with that term, restoration, redemption, whatever term that we use to say that there has been a change in the circumstance that no longer burdens us,
Mhm.
let alone defines us, then it is the relevance of the scripture that a lot of people love to quote, which is Romans 8:28. And it says he works all things together for the good for those who love him and are called according to his purpose. What I do believe sometimes it gets lost even in the Christian environment around that is that everybody has this idea that they're waiting on the Lord to redeem something. And so he's supposed to be the person that does the work rather than him being the partner with them in the work. And the reason that I say it that way, because I still experience moments of grief in the absence parents. You know, when you go through big life transitions, we just graduated the youngest. We're moving into empty nesters. And in lieu of our parents being there, kind of that generation before and so much family showing up around graduation, I wouldn't say that I have not experienced healing around the loss of my dad specifically. For sure, my mom, right? 'Cause mom got to experience a lot more of my dad died so early in my girl's journey that Kinley was 6 months old when my dad passed away, so she's not really ever known life, and Peyton has very few memories, if any, of my dad, so they don't really know life with my dad around, but they both know life with my mom, and because she lived with us in the latter years, the absence of that wouldn't necessarily mean that I don't see where I've witnessed some amazing things in my journey, or that I don't see where God has worked some of that to good.
Mhm, for sure.
So I think it comes back to giving ourselves permission to still feel the emotions that come up
Yeah,
in our story, or the things that are related significant to our story,
yeah,
and it not be relegated to, well, I probably shouldn't maybe talk about the loss of a parent because it was sad to not have a mom or dad at the graduation. You know, that wouldn't be an appropriate way to view my story. What is appropriate is that there was sadness,
sure.
but that sadness is an emotion, not the definition.
Yeah,
And so I think that becomes, as we're in the weeds on story, the through line of story, those emotions don't then redefine who we are, as you keep talking about, like us communicating what went on inside of us or what we experienced while those aspects, those details were happening in our life.
yeah.
But the thing itself isn't really the thing. It is a part of me.
Mhm.
And if we haven't experienced that, it doesn't mean that we haven't felt an emotion that would be so relatable to another person with a different description of a story. That would be the clarity that I'm wanting to draw, and where I've watched the church almost kind of treat trauma, you could call it the sin of another to us, however you want to clarify that. They almost want to dismiss that or disregard the emotional side of that
Mm.
in a way that would cause people to actually want to distance themselves from the story, and
Yeah.
that gets into a different conversation, right? But I ask that because there are times that I see believers maybe not have as much freedom as a non-believer, but I agree with what you said. The longevity of freedom, it's been my experience with people anyway. I'm not Henry Cloud, so I'm I'm not comparing, but in being in people's stories, I have seen where that ends up being something that a person's faith adds a level of relevance, testimony,
Yeah.
that keeps them from getting so introspective to it.
Yes, I think when you were talking about even your sharing your story to you is sharing truth, I think it kind of can even tie in that way. For me, you can be a huge Jesus follower, but if you don't give yourself permission to feel the brevity of pain again, and really get vulnerable and share what went on inside of you, you're still carrying a lie and shame, and you'll never be able to receive that truth. I call it an
Mhm,
exchange. That exchange hasn't happened. And so you're still robbing yourself of a sense of peace that I feel like you can get when you allow yourself to be vulnerable and share and then receive truth. So we have worked with pre believers or non believers, but what I have witnessed, though, is for me, my peace comes from knowing I don't have to do it in my own strength. Like, I just gained so much peace. In Hebrews talks about it's living from that place of
mm,
rest. Like, it's not in my own power. And so I can trust in the goodness of God, and I can trust that he can empower me, and I do trust that he's working all things to my good, and I do trust that he's just a good daddy that I can run to at any moment of any day and sit in his lap and just feel whatever I'm feeling and receive
mhm,
truth. So I don't want to speak for a non-believer or a pre-believer. I don't know who they run to when they don't have the power within themselves to do. But I know that is where my peace comes from, and I'm really passionate about other people experiencing that peace. And so I've witnessed people that maybe wasn't a Jesus follower receive peace and receive
Mhm.
truth. I do feel like there is an acceleration in healing and a longevity in healing when you partner with Holy Spirit. And I've seen that over and over and over again.
Mhm.
There is an acceleration in healing, and they have someone else to go to. They don't have to do it in their own strength.
Yeah, what I'm hearing you articulate in that is going back to the fundamentals of if in the horizontal our needs don't get partnered with, that at least vertically that's a guarantee. And without that agreement, that acknowledgement, that access that the Lord wants, but
Mm,
we're determining whether or not he gets, is a significant contributor to a person's longevity of the freedom
mhm.
and perhaps, let's say, restoration to an aspect of that story where needs were not met.
Yeah. And understandably so. I don't want this to sound condemning at all. There are lots of reasons, me included, why I didn't trust God with my needs in the
Mhm.
past. So that's a legit thing to work through. I don't
Any lingering thoughts on the topic of story that come to mind?
Yeah, I think again, having the courage to share your story from a lens of hope and healing is so powerful. It's so powerful. If you haven't had an opportunity to share your story, I would encourage you to find a safe person to share it with.
I would say that that's also a really important aspect in the age that we're in because vulnerability will validate. You will receive in a healthy context. You will receive validation in your story. Is maybe a measure of subconscious reconciliation. Okay, but what I see being dangerous is how many people get on a camera, end up communicating their story to receive validation because it's an attention, right? So the motive behind them sharing doesn't come from love. And I felt this way. You're just talking really strongly. There are parts of my story that I'm going to communicate, and it would be my hope that either there is a passion and or a joy that you hear in the story
Yes.
because I know that it no longer defines me or has robbed me of the things that I am worthy of receiving on account of what got stolen, killed, or destroyed in that experience.
Mhm.
And so I think that becomes really the relevance to me is when a person can communicate the joy in that, joy would be defined in a little bit more latitude for everybody. You're more prone to, say, communicate words of feelings and emote, whereas, like, I'm more a factual base, but, like, there's these times where I can share these aspects,
Mhm.
right? Details, but you just can discern when there is power in a person's story, and even though there might be, some vulnerability or some newness in them communicating it,
Sure.
there's an awareness, a measure of love that has returned to them, whether it be through the work horizontally or God divinely doing it vertically. You see a hope return to them in a measure of love that they then can represent that carries something that you know is no longer a victim, giving you the detail of their experience.
Yeah. I think we talk about this a lot, like, the kingdom is righteousness, peace, and joy. And that righteousness for me is that exchange, that I amness, who God says I am. And when I know who he says I am, there's peace.
We can say that our story has shaped us, though.
It has shaped us, but it could have shaped me another way if I didn't have the courage to share my story at some point with the safe people, right? If I never had the opportunity to get healing, it would have definitely shaped me in a different way.
Yeah, I think that's the reason why I keep coming back to kind of the church culture because there is also this aspect of being super vulnerable and honest with God,
Mhm.
but you I don't know that you can always receive and walk out full restoration if there isn't the vulnerability to share it horizontally.
Yeah, I think we were all created, again, created for community, and my belief is shame can only be healed in community. So it requires other people.
Well, I think even our fears of loneliness or hurt or sadness or fear itself, the emotion of fear, those other core emotions, they you can't practice those outside of direct interaction with people.
Hmm.
And so I think that takes us back to the topic of spiritual bypassing, which if you want to learn about that, it's a whole podcast that we did before, so you can look that up. But
Hmm.
that's the balance in having a supernatural intervention in our story, which we both
Hmm.
are in agreement to, but also recognizing that it takes people in your journey to get healing in your story because people were the ones that instigated
Right.
the hurt to begin with. And so I think that's just the clarity because otherwise we're probably going to keep our highly adept managers
Hmm.
in close proximity if we don't risk these needs not getting met with one another.
For sure.
Closing thoughts, final thoughts,
Share your story.
share your
Whether,
story.
yeah. And if you need a safe place to share it for the first time or the second time, reach out. Like if you don't feel like you're on the other side of it, you deserve and you are worth getting to the other side of your story, and your story doesn't define you.
Yes, we would consider it a privilege to help you in the journey of your story
And if you have hope and you are healing and experienced healing and you feel like you have a lot of peace and joy around your story, share it.
for sure.
Share it. And because someone else needs to hear the hope that you carry.
Well, thanks for joining us. Stay tuned for another episode of Convo with the Columns.